She prospered their work in the hand of a holy prophet. They journeyed through an uninhabited desert and pitched tents in inaccessible places. They stood up to wars and warded off enemies. They were thirsty and called upon you, and water was given them out of sharply cut rock, and healing of thirst out of hard stone. For through that by which their enemies were punished, through these they being at a loss were served well. Instead of a fountain of an ever-flowing river troubled with the defiled gore of blood in confutation of the baby-killing order, you gave them abundant water unexpectedly, showing through the thirst then how the adversaries were punished. For when they were tested, though being educated in mercy, they knew how being judged in anger the profane were tried. For you tested them like a father in admonition, but those you examined like an abrupt king in sentencing. Both the absent and the present were similarly distressed, for a double grief took hold of them, and a moaning at the memory of what had passed. For when they heard that through their own punishments they were being served well, they became aware of the Lord. For in the exposing long before, they, scoffing, denied the cast-off. At the end of the escape they marveled, thirsting not like the just. In return for their misunderstanding unjust calculations, in which straying they worshipped irrational reptiles and mean beasts, you sent upon them many irrational animals in avenging, so that they would know that one is punished through the things by which one sins. For your omnipotent hand was not at a loss, also having created the world out of formless matter, to send upon them many bears or bold lions, or newly created unknown beasts full of rage, or such as breathe fire-breathing gasps, or a roar scattering smoke, or terrible lightning sparks from the eyes, of which not only could the damage exterminate them, but even the sight could destroy them out of fear. Even without these, they could fall in one breath, being pursued by justice and scattered by your powerful spirit. But you arranged everything by measure and number and weight. For it is always possible for you to greatly prevail, and who can stand against the rule of your arm? Since like a turn of the scale is the whole world before you, and like a drop of morning dew falling on the earth. But you are merciful to all, because you can do everything, and you overlook human sins into repentance. For you love all beings, and you are nauseated by none of the things you made. For you would not hate anything you built. How would anything remain if you had not willed it? Or what was not called forth by you be maintained? You spare all because they are yours, life-loving Master. For your incorruptible spirit is in all. Therefore you refute a little at a time the fallen ones, and reminding admonish for the things in which they sin, so that releasing the vice they will trust in you, Lord. For even those inhabiting your holy land long ago you hated for practicing hostility, works of drugs and unholy rites, and merciless murdering of children, and sacrificial feasting on human flesh and blood, out of the middle of a secret cult, and autocratic parents of helpless lives, you planned to destroy by the hands of our fathers, so that the most valuable land of all for you might receive a settlement worthy of God's servants. But even these you spared as humans, sending wasps in advance of your army, so that they would be destroyed gradually. Not unable in battle to give the profane to the just hands, or to terrible reptiles, or to wipe them out at once by an abrupt word, but judging gradually, giving an opportunity of repentance, not being ignorant that their origin was bad, and their vice implanted, and that their calculating would never change. For the seed was cursed from the beginning, and not from deference to anyone did you grant amnesty to them for sin. For who will say, "What did you do?" Or who will stand against your judgment? Who will accuse you for destroying nations which you made? Or who will come into an institution to you without law concerning unjust persons? For neither is there a God except you, who cares about all, so that you should show that you did not judge unjustly. Nor can a king or tyrant confront you about those punished. Being just, you manage all things justly, believing it alien to your power to condemn one not deserving to be punished. For your strength is the first cause of justice, and your mastering all makes you spare all. For to show strength, the disbelieving of complete power, also you refute among those knowing courage. You of master's strength judge in fairness, and with much restraint you manage us. For the power is present for you whenever you will it. You taught the common people through such work that the just must be humane, and you made your sons have good hope that you would grant repentance for sins. For if the enemies of your servants, also deserving death, with such attentive vengeance and indulgence, given time and opportunity by which they may give up vice, with what precision did you judge your sons, to whose fathers you gave oaths and covenants of good promise? So educating us, our enemies got 10,000 scourges, so that when judging we may meditate on your goodness, and being judged we may expect mercy. From this also those in folly of life, living unjustly, through their own abominations you tormented. For they also wandered farther on paths of error, taking gods even in animals, dishonored of the shameful, being deceived after the manner of foolish children. On account of this, like thoughtless children, you sent judgment for mocking. But those not being admonished by censure for mockery will experience the merited judgment of God. For upon this suffering they are irritated, upon those they believed were gods being punished with them, seeing, whom before they refused to know, recognizing the true God. Wherefore the end of judgment came upon them. For all persons vain by nature, who were ignorant of God, and from good sights were not able to know the existing, nor observing the work did they recognize the artisan, but either fire or wind or swift air, or the circle of stars or forceful water, or the lights of heaven presiding over the world, they assumed were gods. If enjoying the beauty they took these as gods, let them know how much better than these is the Master. For the architect of beauty created these, and if by power and good work they were astonished, let them be aware from these how much more powerful is the one who arranged these. For out of the greatness and beauty of creation, analogously their Maker is contemplated. Nevertheless, on these there is little blame, for perhaps they go astray seeking and wishing to find God. For in returning to its works they search and trust the sight, because beautiful things are seen. But again, not even these are pardoned, for if they were able to know so much that they could guess the age, why did they not find the Master of these sooner? But the miserable and their hopes in dead things, who call gods the works of human hands, gold and silver of skilled practice, and models of animals, or a useless stone work of an ancient hand. If some skilled woodcutter, sawing down an easily moved tree, stripped off deftly all its bark, and crafting it well, prepared a useful implement for the service of life, and the thrown away things of the work spent for preparing food, he ate his fill, but thrown away from these good for nothing, a stick crooked and full of knots, taking, he carves with care in his idleness, and by practice of recreation shapes it, forming it in the image of a person, or likens it to some cheap animal, applying red and coloring its surface red, and applying it to every blemish on it, and making a dwelling for it worthy of it. He puts it in a wall, securing it with iron. Thus so it may not fall. He provides for it, knowing that it cannot help itself, for it is an image and has need of help. And praying about possessions and marriage and children, he is not ashamed of talking to a lifeless thing, and concerning health he calls upon a weak thing, and concerning life thinks fit a dead thing, and concerning aid asks the most inexperienced, and concerning a journey what cannot take a step, and concerning procuring and working and success with hands he asks the most inactive for active hands. Again, someone sailing and intending to venture wild waves cries out to wood more fragile than the ship carrying him. For desire of gain contrived that, and the technician wisdom built it. But your providence, Father, steers it through, because you gave it both a way in the sea and on waves a safe path, showing that you could save it from everything, so that even someone without skill may go on. You will your works of wisdom not be undone. Because of this also humans trust lives to the smallest wood, and coming through waves on a boat are preserved. For even at the start, when arrogant giants were perishing, the hope of the world escaping on a boat left to the ages seeds of generation by your guiding hand. For praised be the wood by which justice comes, but the handmaid is cursed itself, and the one who made it, because he did the work, and the corruptible was named a god. For equally hated by God are the profane and his profanity, for the action will also be punished with the doer. Because of this too, on idols of nations will be oversight, since in the creation of God they fell into abomination, and into traps for human souls, and into snares for the feet of fools. For the concept of idols was the beginning of prostitution, and their discovery corruption of life. For neither was it from the beginning, nor will it be forever. For by the delusion of humans it came into the world, and on account of this their shortened end was conceived. For a father consumed by untimely mourning made an image of a child suddenly taken away, then honored a human now dead as a god, and gave over to those under him mysteries and rites. Then in time the profane custom held to was kept as a law. And by orders of tyrants the carvings were worshipped, whom humans could not honor in person, due to living far away. Impressing again the sight from a distance, they made a visible image of the honored king, so that the absent as present they might flatter by zeal. The ambition of the technician urged also the ignorant into the duty of worship. For perhaps wishing to please the ruling, he forced out by skill resemblance to the beautiful. And many, attracted by the popularity of the work, considered the one honored a little before as a person, now a religious object. And this became for the living an ambush, since persons enslaved by either circumstance or tyranny conferred the unshareable name on stones and wood. Next, it was not enough to err about knowledge of God, but also, living in a great war of ignorance, they label such evils peace. For whether child-murdering rites or clandestine mysteries, or celebrating frantic revels of peculiar institutions, they no longer keep lives nor marriages pure, but either take off another by ambush or pain another by adultery. All is promiscuous blood and murder, theft and deceit, corruption, mistrust, disorder, perjury, confusion of the good, forgetfulness of favors, pollution of souls, perverting of generation, marriage disorders, adultery, and licentiousness. For the worship of nameless idols is the beginning and cause and end of every vice. For either cheering they go mad, or prophesy lies, or live unjustly, or quickly commit perjury. For trusting in lifeless idols, swearing viciously, they do not expect to be wronged. But the just avenge them both ways, since they thought viciously about God, praying to idols, and swore unjustly in deceit, disdaining holiness. For not the power of the things sworn, but the justice due from the sinning, always prosecutes the deviation of the unjust ones. But you, our God, are kind and true, patient and merciful, managing all things. For even if we sin, we are yours, knowing your rule. But we shall not sin, knowing that we are considered yours. For to know you is complete justice, and to know your rule is the root of immortality. For neither did the design of humans' evil arts mislead us, nor the fruitless labor of painters, a figure stained with varied colors, whose sight returns fools into desire, and they yearn for the lifeless form of a dead image. Lovers of vices and those deserving of such hopes are the ones doing and desiring and worshipping. For potters pressing hard on the soft earth mold each one for our service, but remodel out of the same clay, furnishing serving both the clean work and the opposite, all similarly. But what the use of each of these is, the clay workers decide. Also, by bad labor and idle God out of the same clay they mold, who a little before were made out of earth. After a while they go to that out of which they were taken, the debt of the soul being demanded. But it is no concern to them that they are about to retire, or that they have a short life, but they compete with goldsmiths and silversmiths, and imitate copper molders, and believe it glory that they mold counterfeits. Their heart is ash, and cheaper than earth their hope, and less honored than clay their life, because they were ignorant of the one who molded them, and inspired them with an energized soul, and breathed into them living spirit. But they considered our life a game, and living a festival for profit, for it is necessary, they say, to procure it from whatever source, even from vice. For they above all know that they sin, making fragile furnishings of earth and carvings of wood. But most foolish and wretched beyond an infant's soul are all the enemies who oppressed your common people, since they thought all the idols of the nations were gods, which neither have use of eyes for sight, nor nostrils for drawing together air, nor ears to hear, nor fingers of hands for touching, and their feet inactive for walking. For a person made them, and the spirit that has been borrowed molded them. For no person can mold a god like oneself. Being mortal, one works the dead with lawless hands. For one is better than one's religious objects, being oneself alive, but those never. They even worship the most hated animals, for judging by ignorance they are worse than the others. And even as animals the beauty of sight is not to be desired, but they have fled from both God's approval and its praise. Because of this they were deservedly punished by similar ones, and were tormented by many beasts. Instead of punishment you worked well your common people into a desire of appetite for a strange taste, having prepared quails for food, so that those desiring food due to the loathsomeness of what was sent to them might turn away the necessary appetite, and these being needful for a short while also might partake of a strange taste. For inevitable poverty must come upon those tyrants, while to these it was only shown how their enemies were tormented. For when the terrible beast's rage came upon them, and they were destroyed by the biting of twisting snakes, your anger did not continue until the end. As a warning they were disturbed for a short while, having an omen of safety, as a reminder of your law's command. For the one who turned was saved not by the seeing, but by you, the Savior of all. Also in this way you convinced our enemies that you are the rescuer from every evil. For the bites of locusts and flies killed them, and no healing was found for their soul, because they deserved to be punished by such things. But the teeth of poisonous snakes did not conquer your sons, for your mercy came by opposite and healed them. For they were bitten as a reminder of your oracles, and swiftly were delivered. lest falling into deep forgetfulness they might become unresponsive to your good work. For neither herb nor poultice cured them, but Lord, your all-healing word did. For you have authority over life and death, and you lead down into the gates of Hades and up again. A person kills by one's vice, but the spirit that went out does not return, nor is the soul taken over released. To escape from your hand is impossible. For refusing to know you, the profane were whipped by the strength of your arm, pursued by strange rains and hails and sweeping storms, and consumed by fire. For most incredible, in the water which quenches all, the fire was fully active. For the universe is the defender of the just. For at one time the flame was subdued, lest it burn up the animals sent upon the profane, so that they, seeing this, might know that they were driven by the judgment of God. And at another time, even in the middle of water, it burned more dynamically than fire, so that it might ruin the crops of an unjust land. Instead of this, you fed your common people angels' food, and provided for them effortlessly handy bread from heaven, satisfying every pleasure and suited to every taste. For your sustenance manifested sweetness to your children, and serving the desire of those using it, it was transformed to whatever one wished. Snow and ice submitted to fire and did not melt, so that they would know that the fruits of the enemies were destroyed by the fire blazing in the hail and flashing in the rain. But this again was so that the just might eat, and it forgot about its own power. For the creation serving you who made it stretches for the punishment of the unjust, and relaxes for good work on behalf of those who trusted you. On account of this also then, changing into all things, it served your all-nourishing gift, according to the will of the needing, so that your sons, whom you loved, Lord, might learn that the production of fruits does not feed a person, but your saying maintains those trusting in you. For what was not ruined by fire simply melted when warmed by a brief ray of sun. So it may be known that it is necessary to first come giving thanks to you before the sun, and before the rising of the light meet with you. For the hope of the ungrateful will melt like winter frost, and run off like useless water. For great are your judgments, and hard to describe. On account of this, uneducated souls have gone astray. For assuming power over the holy nation, the lawless captives of the dark and prisoners of the long night lay enclosed under roofs, fugitives from eternal providence. For thinking to be unnoticed in their secret sins by the obscure curtain of forgetfulness, they were dispersed, astounded terribly, and agitated by apparitions. For not even the closet holding them kept them fearless, but shattering sounds roared round them, and downcast phantoms with unsmiling faces appeared. Also no force of fire was able to light, nor did the bright flames of stars manage to shine on that gloomy night. Shining through to them alone was a self-moving, fearful fire, and frightened by what was not seen of that sight, they believed the things looked at were worse. Tricks of magic art were laid down, and the pretense of boasted wisdom was refuted. For those promising to drive off the frights and agitation of a sick soul, these deriding caution became sick. For even if nothing agitating frightened them, scared by the passage of monsters and hissing reptiles, they perished, trembling, refusing to look even at the air from nowhere avoided. For miserable cowardice testifies condemned by itself. It always takes hold of difficulties oppressed by conscience. For fear is nothing but giving up the helps from reason, and the inner expectation being weak counts on full ignorance of the cause promising torture. On the really powerless night, and out of the powerless recesses of Hades coming upon the ones sleeping the same sleep, monstrous things of phantoms drove them, and things of the soul paralyzed by betrayal. for unforeseen and unexpected fear poured over them. So whoever was there fell down. Thusly they were kept shut up in an ironless prison. For whether someone was a farmer or a shepherd or a worker laboring in the desert, being seized, one endured the inescapable fate. For with one chain of darkness all were bound. Whether a hissing wind, or melodious sounds of birds in wide-spreading branches, or rhythm of water moving by force, or the harsh crash of rocks thrown down, or leaping animals running unseen, or the sound of howling rough beasts, or an echo bouncing back out of most hollow mountains, terrorizing, paralyzed them. For the whole world was illuminated with bright light, and was held together with unhindered work. But over those alone heavy night was spread, an image of the darkness about to take its turn. But they were heavier to themselves than darkness. But for your holy ones there was great light, who hearing the sound but not seeing the form, since also those not having suffered were blessed, because the ones wronged before were not harming. Being thankful, they even asked pardon for being different, against which you provided a pillar of flaming fire as a guide for their unknown journey, and a harmless sun for foreign ambition. For those deserve to be deprived of light and kept in the dark, the ones guarding your sons as prisoners, through whom the incorruptible light of law was about to be given to the ages. When they were planning to kill the babies of the holy ones, and one child had been exposed and saved, in confutation many of their children were taken away, and in like spirit destroyed in violent water. That night was known before by our fathers, so that securely knowing the promises in which they trusted, they might be heartened. The salvation of the just and the destruction of the enemies were expected by your common people. For in the same way you avenged the opposition, you calling us forward glorified us. For in secret the holy children of the good sacrificed, and in unity agreed to the most divine law. Similarly both their goods and dangers the saints were sharing, already singing the Father's praises. But the discordant cry of the enemies resounded, and the pitiable wailing sound for the children was borne. By a like sentence a slave was punished along with a master, and the people suffered the same things as a king. And in like spirit all in one name of death had uncounted dead. For the living ones were not even enough for the burial, since in one moment their honored generation was destroyed. For mistrusting all because of drugs upon the death of the firstborn, they acknowledged common people to be God's Son. For with still silence surrounding all things, and night in its swiftness half spent, by your omnipotent word from heaven, out of a royal throne, a ruthless warrior wandered in the middle of the ruined land, carrying the sharp sword of your unanswered injunction, and stood filling all things with death, and reached heaven while walking on earth. Then on the spot phantoms and terrible dreams agitated them, and unexpected fears set upon them, and here and there hurled half dead, through which they showed the reason for death, for disturbing dreams forewarned them of this, lest they perish ignorant of why they badly suffer. The experience of death reached also the just, and a plague came to many in the desert. However, the anger did not remain for long, for a blameless man hurried to defend, bringing his personal shield of ministry, prayer and propitiating incense. Standing up to the anger, he also put an end to the event, showing that he is your servant. He conquered the anger not by strength of body, nor by activity of weapons, but by logic he subordinated the ones punishing, reminding them of the Father's promises and covenants. For the dead having fallen on each other in heaps, standing between, he drove back the anger, and severed through its way to the living. For on a robe to the feet was the whole world, and Father's glories were carved on 4 rows of stones, and your majesty on the crown on his head. To these the destroyer yielded, and these he feared, for the trial of the anger alone was enough. The profane were set upon until the end by pitiless anger, for it knew ahead even their intentions, that they being committed to the departing, and with speed sending them forth, regretting it they would pursue. For while they were still mourning and lamenting at the graves of the dead, they fixed on another foolish reason, and those whom begging they threw out, these as fugitives they pursued. For the fate they deserved drew them on to this end, and made them forget what had happened, so that they might fill up the punishment with what remained of the torments, and your common people experience an incredible journey, and those might find a strange death. For the whole creation in particular came to be reformed again from above, complying with your orders, so that your children might be kept unharmed. The cloud overshadowed the encampment, and out of what was water before, dry land was seen coming up, an unhindered way out of the Red Sea, and a plain of green grass out of the violent surf, where the whole nation came through, sheltered by your hand, seeing marvelous wonders. For like horses they were grazing, and like lambs were leaping, praising you, Lord, who rescued them. For they still remembered their sojourning, how instead of producing animals the earth brought forth gnats, and instead of emptying itself of water the river was full of frogs. Later they also saw a new generation of birds, when desire led them to ask for luxurious meats. For their relief quails came up from the sea. Also the vengeance did not come upon the sinners without previous signs by the force of thunderbolts. For justly they suffered for their bad peculiarities, for also they practiced the harsher hating of strangers. For some did not receive the ignorant who passed by, but these enslaved beneficial strangers. Not only that, but some oversight will be theirs, since hatefully they received the aliens. But the ones with celebrations whom they already received, having shared the same rights, they treated badly with terrible toil. Also they were struck with loss of sight, as those were at the door of the just, when surrounded by yawning darkness, each of them tried to find the way through their door. For the elements being corrected by themselves, as on a harp notes vary the kind of rhythm, all the time continuing by ringing. This is inferred out of clearly seeing what happened. For land things were transformed into water things, and the swimming changed to walk on earth. Fire maintained in water its own power, and water forgot its quenching nature. Flames, contrary to destroying animals, did not wither the flesh of those walking around, nor did they melt the crystals of the easily melted type of ambrosial food. For in all things, Lord, you exalted and glorified your common people, and not overlooking stood by in every time and place.